I am Razio.
What's up, you beautiful bastards? So, I know I've said several times that I was done making videos about Final Fantasy XIV. I mean, it's a game that at one point was the main focus of my channel, and I want to reiterate that I don't get pleasure in crapping on the game, and that's not the intent of this video. So keep that in mind before you start raging in the comments. But now that I've been back to streaming again and making content again after I've been away for the entire summer practically, I've been asked several times that if I've heard about FanFest coming up for Final Fantasy XIV, or if I've heard, about Yoshi-P's statements on tackling difficulty in the game, such as raids and whatnot. And I want to answer that yes, I have seen it. But in the end, to me, it doesn't really matter. Because in my view, Final Fantasy XIV can never be the MMO that I would want to play again. And I'll explain why. It can't be fixed, no matter what Square or Yoshi-P do. And at this point, I won't promise you'll never see a Final Fantasy XIV video on my channel again. I mean, who the f knows at this point? But please, before you rage click out, let me explain why I feel this way. Final Fantasy XIV has a deep-rooted core issue that can't be fixed. Now, can the game become improved over what it is now? I mean, yes, absolutely. It could be miles better than it is now. But before I get to what the core problem with Final Fantasy XIV is, we need to make it clear what things, in my opinion, can and need to be changed in order to make the game better. I'll go as fast as I can, too, through these so as not to waste any time, as I want to get to the point of why, in my opinion, 14 is flawed at its core in an unfixable way, but let's just go. First, Endgame needs to be completely overhauled. The way Endgame has been since A Realm Reborn has not changed, and it's tired and it's boring. Endgame's failures are highlighted by several factors, which are as follows. Boss fights are all way too similar, circular or square rooms with death touch edges. Boss has a knockback to throw you off, insta-killing you or into the death edge. Midway through the fight, the boss does some super cool looking attack that you always just either tank LB3 through, or you had to beat a DPS check right before it. It happens so it doesn't kill your whole party. Lather, rinse, repeat. Those are I just pretty much described almost every fight in the game. The rewards and gear you get, this is number 2, are absolutely useless. They add nothing useful outside of just being stat sticks, so numbers are bigger. And there are no on-use trinkets, no tier set bonuses that change class functionality or talent selection. We'll get to that in a minute. And due to crafted gear, top tier Savage gear gives you no real advantage in the next tier that comes out after that anyway. There's really no meaningful 4-man content that is actually rewarding outside of, bragging rights. The hardest content in the game, Ultimate Raids, is once or twice in an expansion. And again, it is mostly about bragging rights, and you get some, glam, like a weapon glam. Now, number 3, classes are heavily homogenized, like worse than any other MMO I've ever played. There are no real RPG elements in the jobs, no talent systems, for example, no, skill changers, no real gear choices or decisions that you have to make about your character. For example, not only does every samurai play the same way as every other samurai, all jobs are now just variations of DPS with a different colored icon. The meme that are you a blue, red, or green DPS is true. Next up, the story with Dawntrail has fallen off a cliff, and the story used to be Final Fantasy XIV's biggest highlight in the entire genre. In fact, even before Dawntrail, I felt Square was lifting way too many things from other Final Fantasy games instead of coming up with new ideas, and it started to get really old. And I understand nostalgia is a powerful thing and can be a useful tool when you're in a game that's, a long series such as Final Fantasy, but it's old now. And it's tired, and it's boring, and it's quite frankly lazy. And I know that with Dawntrail they did do that and stepped away more from their past, but it ended in absolute disaster, as many have seen. Another thing on the list, relic weapons have become just more boring endgame tombstone grind crap, which is no different than all the other gear grinds in the endgame that have existed since A Realm Reborn. In short, Final Fantasy XIV has repeated the same formula with little to no deviation since A Realm Reborn, and everybody feels it, knows it, and sees it. But let's say Yoshi-P and his team miraculously fixed all the issues I just talked about. Let's say each and everything I just listed was overhauled and changed in the most positive way in the next expansion that Final Fantasy XIV releases. Would the game be improved? Absolutely. But for me, it wouldn't bring me back to the game because the key major flaw would still be present. And it isn't something that Square even can fix. What is it? All right, time to stop blue-balling all of you. It's the game engine itself. We have to remember that Final Fantasy XIV initially released as 1.0, which was a very poorly optimized engine and was an engine that sole goal, it was to create a game very different than what Final Fantasy XIV is now. It's no secret, even admitted by Yoshi-P, that when he was assigned to save Final Fantasy XIV from the 1.0 disaster, he took a lot of inspiration from World of Warcraft's designs. Not all, but a lot, which means he had to adapt Final Fantasy XIV's current engine into doing things it wasn't really designed to do. The flaws of Final Fantasy XIV's engine have nothing to do with its age, by the way. WoW's engine, for example, is much older than that, but still holds up gameplay-wise to this day. In fact, I'd argue it's the main reason WoW is still the most played and popular MMORPG, but I digress. There was no way Yoshi-P and Square could start a new engine from scratch when they were rushing to fix Final Fantasy XIV when 1.0 failed. They simply didn't have the time, probably the money, and so it's all understandable why they didn't just start completely from scratch. But now, because of the way things played out, in my opinion, Final Fantasy XIV's engine just can't do what it needs to do to keep players like me interested. I mean, the engine's limitations are a prime reason for many things, i.e., why boss fights have to be designed the way they are, why PvP is the most unplayed part of the game and most people can't stand it. I mean, PvP is much more reaction-based and dependent on making plays when compared to PvE in any game, and Final Fantasy XIV's engine and the way its server tick works just isn't compatible with that type of gameplay. I mean, I've played a lot of MMORPGs, okay? More than I can even count off the top of my head, and it's kind of sick too. I should get my fucking head checked.
That escalated quickly.
And Final Fantasy XIV is the only MMORPG I personally have ever played to this day where mechanic warning indicators are the actual thing that does damage to you and not the attack animation of the enemies itself. It's all hard-coded into the netcode, into the engine, and into the server tick. And sure, you can get used to it. I did when I still played the game, but it feels cheap that you can't make game-saving plays to save yourself from mistakes you made in the gameplay or to save a teammate. And it looks, quite frankly, retarded to boot when you're yards away from an attack animation and it still hits and kills you. It feels like you're playing the game seconds in the past instead of reacting in the present. The flawed engine is why when doing your optimum rotation, for example, on any job, your animations clip through each other and cancel themselves out and go into the next one, which is a shame in my opinion because Final Fantasy XIV has some of the best and most beautiful looking combat animations in the genre. So in my opinion, Final Fantasy XIV's engine holds it back from being the game that it could have been if it had been designed with its current mindset right from the start instead of reaching that 1.0 disaster. Which isn't a knock on Square or Yoshi-P. The game was indeed brought back from the dead when they released A Realm Reborn, but because of the limitations of its engine, it's very obviously long in the tooth and being hamstrung, and can never be an MMO that has the type of gameplay that would make me come back to the game. And I'll say it again. The thing I believe that keeps people playing World of Warcraft, for example, is not the lore. The lore in that game and storytelling has been shit for a long time, or necessarily its game design. It too, has a gear treadmill, though its gear and RPG systems are far better than what is currently in Final Fantasy XIV because they exist in the first place. It's the gameplay and how reactive of a game it is, how it feels to press buttons and control your character. And at the end of the day, if the gameplay in any game is lacking, that game can never reach its full potential. I do hope that Final Fantasy XIV is improved and that Yoshi-P and his team wake up, start taking risks and chances and overhauling things, and serious, gigantic overhauls are done in Final Fantasy XIV. It would improve the game a lot. But because of Final Fantasy XIV's core, which is its engine, it just won't be a game for me. I thought it would be much easier making a video about it than having to repeatedly say these points while I'm streaming. So anyway, guys, thoughts and opinions down below. Again, for some reason, whenever I make a Final Fantasy XIV video that is critical of it at all, that's when I get the most hate messages ever. And bring it on.
Ooh, nobody gives a shit.
I mean, everybody's entitled to their own opinion. You can love the game all you want. I can hate the game all I want. We shouldn't affect each other. But anyway, guys, comments and opinions down below. Thank you so much for the support over the last few months. Content's still coming out. I'm streaming again, as I said. Stream schedule is still being set. But everyone, take care of yourselves. Have a good one. And as always, my friends, keep it real.